Welcome, Kelly Zuniga
Well, thank you. Welcome.
from KZ Consulting. We're going to talk about that a lot, but before I do, I have to brag on you just a little bit
Oh,
because
no.
I found your background so incredibly interesting and unique. You've been 30 years in the charitable arena.
Right.
You've been on the donor side, and you work with a lot of donees as well. And prior to that, or as part of that, really, you were CEO of the Houston Holocaust Museum,
Wonderful experience.
bringing in 100,000 visitors each year, the only bilingual museum in the country.
Yes.
And you were on the foundation board for the Houston Holocaust Museum with about 14 members.
That's right.
And you raised nearly $60 million
We did.
while you
it
were
was
there.
a big group effort, but it was an incredible experience, especially working with those donors that made it possible for us to build that beautiful museum.
And it is beautiful. But after a career like that in your own consulting firm now,
Uh-huh.
what other hills are there to climb? What are the aspirations and inspiration for what you're doing now in the consulting company?
Well, it's really interesting because that experience of working with donors to achieve such a mighty goal was transformational for me. It really focused me from the standpoint of the importance of when you really truly believe you can accomplish something and you get behind it with your own dollars and cents, you can change the world. And as far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of people out there that have that capability, but they just don't know how to go about it. And they can't frame it correctly, or they just are too busy in their incredible lives to focus enough so that they can, really make a huge impact on society.
That one person can make such an impact, and
One
you do
person.
it with such heart. And I do think that it's a left brain, right brain kind of situation where you do need to, get roots in what they're passionate about.
Yes, in fact,
That's what you do so well.
well, thank you. I think you have honed in on the key word, and that is passion. Is that these donors have to have a passion for what they want to support, or it just won't happen. And with passion is, let's say, as they say, is purpose. So it's truly purposeful work where they want to solve a disease. They want to build a museum. They want to see young pre-K students have the opportunity to read. I mean, it's just, there are so many great opportunities to improve the world. And it really does begin with your personal passion and then following that through. So,
Yeah, the passion and then the execution, because
Absolutely.
they may want to give, but you help them determine the strategy.
exactly. And there's so many interesting strategies, especially in your work where you are creating strategies for individuals that you might have estate planning issues or investment challenges, or they might have transitional issues happening in their family. It's the same thing in charitable giving because you can give money just as an individual, or you can include your entire family and form a foundation. You can form charitable trusts so that those are benefiting a number of different individuals or entities. There are all these variables that you can work with on an individual plan. So it can seem complex, but actually what my job is to find out what is the best path for that particular person, or what is the best charitable instrument that meets their needs and their time of life as well. So it's really quite fascinating because everybody is unique. It's never dull.
And what you can do when you're working with people like that is help them truly realize dreams, things that they
Exactly.
wanted to do but couldn't imagine a way to do it.
Right.
Right?
I always said and told people that were raising money for institutions that they were dream weavers.
Wow.
Because they
It's
truly
beautiful.
are. You're listening to what that individual wants to accomplish, and you're providing the tools to accomplish that. So that's very, very similar of what we're doing in this situation, is
I
making
don't
those dreams come true.
I'm not sure of this because I'm not fully educated on the whole philanthropic community, but it would seem maybe there are very few people that have worked on both sides of this, working with large donors for years and understanding their commitments, but then also working with the individuals that can make things happen if they just know why or how.
Right. I
Are,
think
are there many? I think what you do is very unique.
I think it is unique because of the fact that people are very private when they have that capability. So it's different. It's difficult to meet a lot of people within that segment of society. I mean, obviously they're protected because of their wealth. They don't are not necessarily external as much. But in the case of Houston, you know, I think first of all we have a very friendly and involved community. But the fact that I've been here for 27 years,
Yeah, nearly 3
I met a
decades.
lot of these philanthropists before they were philanthropists.
Interesting.
And so they have
And that history.
and that history, and they have involved in what has happened to them in their lives. So I've seen them mature and known them over several years. So that's an advantage of being part of the community and watching people mature
Yeah.
as philanthropists. Which
I
is
just think it's really unique that with that 30 years, you have the experience to match the right donors with the right donees. And a lot of people tend to think that this is only tax motivated. And certainly
Yeah.
some of this giving is tax motivated.
right.
But it's beyond that, isn't it?
It's very much beyond it. It was interesting when I was preparing for today. I noticed that you asked me that question, and I myself have only met one person in my professional life that was solely tax motivated.
Really.
Just one out of all the donors, because of course there's an advantage and there's a benefit of making a charitable gift, but no, philanthropy is taught. It is learned at the family when you're young. This is something that has
Interesting.
evolved in an individual over a long period of time by what? By watching their parents, by watching their family members and what they have done.
Woven into their value system.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize that philanthropy is truly taught. So young people to become philanthropists have to learn what it takes and the beautiful return that it produces
That you
when
can
gifts are
realize.
made.
Good.
And it's a very joyous element, is by giving. It's such positive return to the individual that it becomes quite addictive. And I think that
I can
that's like the
understand
most
that.
positive addictive quality anyone can have,
Is joyous giving.
is joyous giving.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it is.
So no, yes, the initial motivation might be to save taxes, but at the end, it's the feeling that they receive upon changing society
Right.
and seeing what an impact they've made.
And from a tax motivation standpoint, and I don't know if you think about this or talk about this, but we tend to think that people have social capital, and the social capital are the taxes you can pay or the philanthropy you can give to your passion,
Right.
your cause.
Uh-huh.
But I'm not sure that everyone really realizes that they do have that choice. In
Yes.
other words, they can send money to the general treasury,
Uh-huh.
or they can do some homework, which it does take time. And they can work with someone like you who can consult and kind of
planning.
educate and plan, and even work with an estate planner who's looking at the tax implications. But it takes some time to do that and some effort. But that's where you combine the beauty of the tax savings and the charity. 'Cause
Absolutely.
you really control where your social capital goes.
Exactly. And you're in control. That's a key word, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yes,
You're in control of where your dollars go.
that's right. And
Yep.
doesn't everyone want to have control of where their dollars go
Absolutely.
and the impact behind them?
Mhm.
So I guess you're right from the perspective of a little bit of hard work and focus. The return is just,
Exponential.
exponential.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's take it back to day now, because you have so many contacts on both the donor and donee side.
Right.
How do you spend a typical day now?
Well, a lot of it is from the standpoint of working with a foundation per se, that they might just be starting and founding their foundation and they want to know how to structure it.
Wow, so you will work with startups.
Right, with
consulting
startups
them.
and people that want to grow their foundation. It might be from the standpoint of obtaining grants for their foundation, but they also have to decide what is their purpose of the foundation and what is going to be the focus.
And I would imagine that's pretty competitive.
It is.
So
It
you have
is.
to differentiate your foundation.
Exactly.
So you work with people to help them find, the way that they can
Fine-tune what-
articulate that advantage.
And then also,
Wow, that's great.
and the process associated with how do you get there? How do you make that happen? Which is really important.
So is starting your own firm kind of the culmination of everything you've done on either side to be able to just ramp it up?
Very much so. I think from the standpoint of raising money a majority of my life, running large institutions, I saw a need. And the need is that people need more advice and motivation to make these significant gifts, but they also need protection. And so from the standpoint of the recipients, larger institutions, I think it's really important from a donor stewardship standpoint that they get what they should receive. They should receive their recognition. They should receive their stewardship reports. They should become a part of that institution from the standpoint of being in the know.
That's
being
fascinating.
the first to know.
So it's an agreement, if you will. There are two
is.
parties,
It
and
is.
both ought to be able to get what they want from that agreement. And the more you spell that out
The better.
early,
Right.
the better, right?
Yes.
Just like
Donors
planning.
typically, they don't think about those things after they make the gift. They're so excited about making the gift
And passionate about the
and
gift.
passionate, but it's after the gift that's really important.
Wow, the follow-up beyond the check
That is correct.
or the gift of the stock or whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
But that's a great point. I'm sure that a lot of people need help there. How are we doing in America in terms of gifting? Are we generous? Are we doing well compared to other countries, compared to other groups?
Well, I brought a quote, and I actually looked this up this morning because I wanted you to have a reference point as
Great.
of today from
Perfect.
from the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and it's disappointing. Basically, what we're finding out is that unfortunately, gifts are declining. And they're declining from the standpoint of gifts made to smaller charitable institutions. That's like less than $1 million in asset size.
Okay.
They have seen a decrease between last year and 2021 and 2022 of around 31%.
31%.
And of course, the pandemic has had a major impact.
I was going to ask you, how did people get out to give their message to try and keep it going?
Well, I think, it's with the pandemic and the boomerang effect is that not as many people came to programs and weren't as engaged in person.
In community.
In community.
In person.
So that has still not fully returned. And so as a result, funding has been impacted, smaller nonprofits as well. But what's really interesting is the top 50 American individuals and couples who gave to charity in 2023. They committed a total of $12 billion, all right, which is pretty impressive.
Very.
But that is 28% less than was made in 2022. So what's happening is they might be
even
contributing.
in 2022.
Yes. So what's happening is they're contributing to their foundations, right? But they're not releasing the assets. So we were having this conversation earlier about donor-advised funds. And that is this wonderful instrument,
Right.
from the perspective that you can make a donation to a donor-advised fund, you receive a charitable deduction immediately, the growth is tax exempt. But guess what you have to do? You have to relinquish the assets.
So you think there's funds locked up, so to speak, in
Yes.
donor-advised funds because it's not required to make a distribution. Private
Correct.
foundations require that 5% per
Yes.
year. And so you think funds are locked up.
Locked up.
And maybe lack of involvement in the community getting out.
It's really exciting when you form your DAF and you get it going. And of course, you're going to make a gift immediately. But after 2 or 3 years, you get busy. You don't focus on it. You
Good
have
point.
those benefits. So from the perspective of a charity, they're not as excited about this fact because a lot of those funds have, just what you said, do not have a required distribution rate, similar to a private foundation. Now, I see legislatively that going to change in the future, possibly.
Do you think it will?
I think so.
It is one of the things that attracts people because it gives them time
Yes.
to figure out
Right.
what their charitable endeavors are.
Right.
And I see both sides.
So that should be an interesting element in the
Interesting.
future just to focus on. But
And
it
that-
is an incredible instrument.
Yes, and certainly that's a factor that they don't have to make distributions. But I know all gifting isn't tax motivated, but do you think the fact that we've had the largest estate tax exemption in history in the last couple of years? I mean, a couple doesn't have an estate tax until they're over 27 million.
Exactly.
So there's not as much tax motivation
Right.
when there's a larger exemption.
But then that's changing.
That's
So
going to sunset
That's right.
back to 2026, where anything over about 13 or 14 million.
And I
And
think,
it may drive more.
oh, I think so.
You do?
Yes.
Are you? So you
I can
expect
see-
that to be
Sure, they're going to be much more motivated to
Okay.
make, hopefully, more charitable
Right.
gifts as a result through estate planning. As a
I
result.
think that's great. Another thought I had that you kicked off when you talked about family and family dynamics is, someone sets a donor advised fund or a foundation up, but as you said, they get busy and they start thinking about not only their own objectives, but what would their kids like
Right.
to invest in charitably. Are there ways that you can align family members? I know we do family retreats, but how do you do that? How do you align and bring family members into that?
To me, that's the most joy of working with families is doing that, because then you have generational wealth that will continue from my perspective, from a philanthropic standpoint. Because what are you doing? You're teaching the young, children within this family the importance of giving and the process. So how do you do that? Well, you involve them in this charitable work. And they find it so rewarding, just like their parents do. And so it's just like anything, asking people what is important to them, refining that down so they understand 1, 2, 3 priorities that they'd like to identify. You teach them how to research the charities themselves.
Good point.
How do we find a valuable recipient?
And where would we get a good return
Exactly.
on our efforts
Right.
here? So what is the right age? When do you begin transferring not just valuables, but values?
I think that as early as 3rd grade is a great time to start.
Okay.
Because they can read pretty well by 3rd grade. And believe me, technology-wise, they're way ahead of us.
That's true.
So they can actually do research on their own. and they have a sense, I think, of a greater sense of what community is all about. Many of them might be in Scouts or Girl Scouts or involved in their schools by then for specific initiatives, social service initiatives.
Right.
So let them choose. Let
Sounds
them
good.
have that
And you know, they're
experience.
capable of these viral campaigns. If they really wanted to, they could go social media wise.
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. So as early as third grade.
Yes.
How do you begin the conversation with families about, hey, you know, you do a lot of gifting already, and maybe they've been doing a lot of checkbook philanthropy where, you know,
Yes.
whoever calls more
Right.
often gets the check. But
Yes.
it may not be focused on a longer term goal.
Right.
How do you sit down with them and talk with them about getting started?
I think that that's such a great question, Deborah, because most people do checkbook philanthropy. It's whatever comes across their desk and they have feel it's a worthwhile cause. So it's just like running a company. Like your company has a strategic plan, I'm sure. Well, it's a strategic philanthropy plan that you establish for the family. So you have the ability to highlight specific goals that you wish to achieve in your philanthropy within those, that family as a group. So taking the time to hone in those and identify what's important to you and why is the first step into much more strategic direct philanthropy.
Well, and it's so much more rewarding because rather than taking those calls and just committing because you want to get off the phone,
Right.
and I mean, it happens.
And a
if
lot
you
of
can-
people, as ROI, return on investment, I like that you brought that up, is that they don't even think about an ROI in their philanthropy. This is a new way of thinking. They deserve a return on investment, and they deserve to know what happens with the use of their funds.
I remember a family retreat where the wealth creator was a CEO, and he looks at RRR and everything.
Yes.
But you know, we do diagnostic testing in terms of people's how and why.
Right.
And in the family, he was the only one of 4 who was concerned whatsoever about rate of return
Right.
and getting a return. I mean, you know, he would say, you know, my wife would give any amount to anyone who came, being facetious. But, you know, the rest of them were just inherently charitable.
Yes.
And he was not. So, I mean, you have to get to everybody in that group, don't you?
Yes, you really do. But I think that the new direction in larger gift management is very much strategic planning associated with what directive you want to follow, and also being educated enough to set up parameters of return before you make the gift. So this takes a lot of research on your part, or hiring somebody to do that research and figuring out exactly what are your expectations behind your gift.
And it is a combination, especially for someone wanting ROR, combination often of a financial strategy along with a charitable inspiration,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Yes.
So,
But it is a new shift as far as the way people are looking at philanthropy.
and it's really healthy because the psychological groceries you get when you do it right have got to be huge.
Yeah, it just makes you give more.
Yeah, right. Gets all that dopamine going, right?
That's right.
And you go for more. It's really fun.
It's really fun.
We talked a little bit about donor advised funds. And do you see it going more that direction these days than private?
Absolutely.
It is.
The
Okay.
growth has just been tremendous, as you're well aware.
Yeah,
And I don't see
incredible.
it stopping. The main reason for, especially for our listeners, is that the costs of running your own foundation are significant. And
Can you speak to that? Because
Yes.
a lot of people want to know.
they want okay, and sometimes having a foundation at I would say 10 years ago was very much in vogue. It's kind of a status symbol that your family has a foundation, and that's great. But truly, if it's less than 10 million in assets, it's a pretty expensive charitable instrument. You have audit fees, legal fees, You have administration fees. There are fees associated with, having your meetings, the orchestration of those.
And you have to be compliant,
And
otherwise those deductions are at risk.
Exactly. So if you're looking from 0 to 10, the DAF is a great
That's
alternative.
a great guideline.
Yes.
So from 0 to 10, because the number of people that you'd either have to hire internally or hire a lot of external specialists
Right.
would cost hundreds of thousands, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
So that's important for people to realize. And I think that is, there are a lot of their financial advisors and their legal advisors are telling them, we'll just do a DAF.
You're right. And I think it could be money is locked up, but there's going to be a big payday sometime, because it's amazing how people have loved the simplicity
Yes.
of the DAF.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of strategies, a lot of people are accumulating a lot of money in retirement plans. Are there any specific strategies when you talk to donors that they seem to like more than others, and are they engaged in looking at the taxation of their qualified plan
Right.
at death?
With the change in the tax law recently, regarding the distributions, right?
The 10-year
The 10-year.
requirement to distribute.
I noticed almost immediately on behalf of in a charity role that people were starting to make distributions. It increased significantly from their IRA because of that change in the tax law.
And some they could make directly if they had the qualified charitable donation. If they were,
Absolutely.
in their 70s, they can make that direct.
Direct. And that's where I saw it the most.
You saw, in
Yes.
that. But what about testamentary gifts of IRAs? I mean, if your kids are only going to get 35 cents on the dollar, are you seeing testamentary gifts of retirement plans increasing too?
Yes.
Interesting.
Utilizing that as well. And leaving that legacy is so simple and so wonderful that I would encourage everyone to do it.
So it's just a beneficiary designation, right? You don't have to, a lot of people don't realize that retirement plans pass by beneficiary designation. You don't have to change your will.
No.
You can simply make the beneficiary the charity.
Yes, and it's so simple. And then the charity can't book that gift, but what they do is they recognize you from the standpoint
Interesting.
of you are part of their bequest society. Then you become more attached and recognized within that entity.
And you learn more about them.
Yes.
Because now you're getting the recognition and you're wanting to be in the know.
You got it.
And so then you can decide if you want to do more.
So it's a win-win, because they might never have known that you had charitable intent to the institution. But now, because of this easy way and notifying them that they are a beneficiary, it's just a start of a really positive relationship.
It is. And, we've kind of taken that a notch. We talked a little bit about you don't have to just do it during death. If you're elderly, you can do the $100,000 to charity. But also, if you've got something that's going to be taxed away heavily, maybe optimizing distributions during your lifetime also, even if you're not old enough to get the
looking
qualified
ahead and anticipating that.
deduction.
Absolutely.
Yep, great. Any other design strategies that you've seen that are exciting that your clients have done?
Well, I think from the standpoint of utilizing charitable trust with insurance is definitely become much more popular. Basically replacing that wealth through the utilization of insurance, because the family might not be as charitable as the parents, and they're not excited about their parents getting less.
Interesting.
So that seems to be becoming more popular, more well known. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but it really solves a lot of problems, because if the children are not philanthropically inclined, they in many ways, become resentful if the parents are giving away the assets to charity. And this solves that problem.
It's really interesting. I was talking, with a very high profile family that had been independent energy, and their parents took a pretty hard line that they wanted their kids to have something, but they didn't want to give them so much that they wouldn't ever need to do anything.
Yes.
But it was the lion's share of the estate. And this next generation was looking at their situation and looking at all of the money that had gone to charity, and they were second guessing that. So there is a way to give it away, but wealth replace with some type of trust that would buy insurance to replace that wealth that you gave away.
Exactly.
You could have your cake and eat it too, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it.
Okay.
Having your cake and eating it too. And then you keep peace in the
Harmony.
family. Harmony, which is important.
It is, isn't it?
But then doing good at the same time. And then the one thing that the kids don't realize is that when the gift is made and their parents are gone, that is their legacy as well. And so in many cases,
Good point.
the children become just involved with those charities, whereas before they had no relationship before. Because why? Their name is on the building, or it runs a particular research program. And so
Amazing.
You're pulling them in.
You're pulling them in when they might not
Right.
even have been as engaged.
Right, because
You're
of their
pulling.
age, they're busy with young children. And so
And they're not angry
no,
that something was lost.
this wasn't the
there's
time for
part of a
them.
whole plan.
Exactly. And I have seen that happen so many times, which is a really wonderful thing.
It's exciting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game.
No, not
Okay.
at all.
Yep. I mean, it's clear that you have a growth mindset. You've always wanted to give more, do more. But, what hills are you climbing in KZ Consulting? What would be, if you looked back 10 years from now, what would happen that would be, you saying, wow, this was great. Great decision to do this. And
Right. Well, I think it's more from the standpoint of directing significant philanthropists to make more gifts and make some very, very monumentally impactful gifts to our society to benefit Houston, to benefit, what is important to them, and to be part of that. It's such a privilege. I mean, from a story standpoint, Lester and Sue Smith, they made a $15 million gift to name our campus, the Holocaust Museum Houston, and enabled us to build the building. And the one thing that has always struck me is that they really, they knew it was a great thing and they were very excited about doing it, but they don't know the impact in perpetuity that this building has on every single person that walks through those doors. So you have to realize that you have a legacy in that gift, but you'll never know the incredible impact your generosity had on society.
year after year, decade after decade.
Right. And to me, that is just such an honorable aspect of working towards having one of these gifts come to fruition.
I'm so glad you said that because they do need to be recognized for that. And we lost Lester.
Yes.
And his
Yes.
wife survives him. And,
Right.
for her to be able to also be engaged in that and see, it's just incredible.
Yeah, it's such a
amazing.
positive thing. But that's how it works with all significant, naming gifts or ones that are impacting all over society. But they're important. They're really, really important.
Do the individual donors you work with, do they start knowing what it is they want to
No.
benefit? Okay, so how do you
No,
get
it
'em-
actually surprises me.
Does it? It would surprise me
I think
too.
a lot of these individuals are very special, highly intelligent, have traveled extensively in their lives, and they have a keen sense of what they want to do or what cause they're passionate
They
about.
might even have a foundation.
Yeah, they might already have a foundation.
Okay.
But how to get there in the end, no. It's really our job is to make it easy for them and
to make it easy, but
spell
you
that out.
recognize that philanthropy is a business, and they want to run that foundation
like a
business.
Yeah, efficiency, making sure that every dollar allocated goes to truly what they were intending for the purpose. It's very, very important. You know, there's, I don't know if you've ever read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
I have not, but
Well, that's because of my Holocaust background. I was introduced to his book, and he's really a famous psychiatrist that was held in 4 concentration camps during World War II. And so he figured that not only trying to survive that environment, but he needed a purpose. He needed to do something when he was there. So what he did is he observed people's behavior when they were in the concentration camps and noticed that there was a keen difference between those that survived and those that, you know, did not survive per se. They did not flourish necessarily, and in a very, very difficult situation. And what he honed in on is that they had a reason to live. They had a purpose.
a purpose.
So the purpose could
at
be
the very most base level, a reason to live.
A reason to live. It
Amazing.
could be so that they could care for their wife when they returned, so that they could see the birth of a child that they or grandchild or whatever purpose that is.
Spend time with their children.
Correct.
Adult and otherwise.
Or they were going to teach people about what happened with the Holocaust and make sure that it never happened again. So that purpose is so vital in everyone's life. And you obviously... Driving force. And so what we've really noticed is that people that don't have that particular purpose have very empty lives. And those that are the philanthropists or the survivors, for example, that have a very clear purpose, have very successful lives.
You know, what occurs to me is that not everyone is at the top of the hill all of the time.
Right.
Someone can be very successful but lose their way or lose their purpose. Something changes in their career. Something changes in their family, a tragic death. And they could lose that purpose for a little while. But that's a way to get back on track, is to just think about that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because it does happen. But there's so much joy with following your purpose, right?
And
seeing good. That, I mean, why wouldn't you want that in your life, right? So it's a great book. You have to read it.
Well, that might be the answer to my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your life, you've worked with and around great leaders. You were even in the financial industry before you came into the charitable area. And you've probably gotten a lot of advice, and maybe even unsolicited advice. As you look back, is there any piece of advice that was your best or worst that has kind of led you to your success?
I think, well, I've had a lot of incredible mentors, I was just blessed. I worked with amazing people in the field. But I brought this quote because this quote to me encapsulates this advice. And it's a quote from Margaret Mead, and it's famous. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And that, to me, encapsulates all what we've been talking about this morning, because it's the fact that you really believe that you can make the change. And if you follow that path, you'll be successful.
The only thing that ever has. What a beautiful, beautiful idea. And it's hopeful.
It's very hopeful.
You know, she didn't say you have to start with gazillions. An idea and the power of an idea and collective work.
Right, and her work was challenging enough. And just think of, from the standpoint of she believed it so earnestly and felt that in any situation, it's really the only thing that has ever worked to change our world is the fact that other people got behind it and were successful as a result. So
Purpose and cause.
purpose and cause. Very, very true.
Well, is there anything I should have asked that I didn't, Kelly? Because you've been inspiring, to say the least.
I just really have enjoyed knowing you and seeing your work. I wanted to pay you a compliment and your team
Thank you.
because you are doing this kind of work so that we can have more philanthropists out there. They don't even know they have the ability to be a philanthropist, and you're making sure that they understand that they can become someone that does change society, which is pretty noble.
Thank you, because you and I both know that is a really, it's a winning strategy for everyone involved, is to engage in the community and give back to the community we've prospered in. So thank you so much for coming today to the Legacy Lounge. You're
Yes.
among those christening it. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Deborah.
Take care.